Winning Blueprint presents
in the lab room.
What's new in?
Welcome. You are in the lab room. I'm your host, Luke. Thank you for joining me. Today we find out what's new in St. Louis. And this is courtesy of YouTube subscriber Cubone Studios. And he just snuck right in. And look, this was the longest layover from time that I uploaded the video until someone actually posted a comment. So a lot of you could have snuck in there, but Cubone Studios snuck in, got the Rams off. So we will be talking about what's new in St. Louis today. I'll just throw out this reminder. If you want your team to be next, all you have to do is simply leave a comment at the bottom and be the first one to do so. That's the key. Be the first to leave a comment at the bottom of this very video stating that you want your team to be next. And simply, all you need are the words next and your team. Now, you can dress it up and give it whatever twist or flavor you want. But at the end of the day, all I'm looking for is the word next and your football team. And they will be the next in line to be in this series, What's New In. And so I'm using the UPS format, you pick series. And so it is up to you guys to determine who will be next. It's been a lot of fun to this point. Let's keep it going. So now we'll be talking about what's new in St. Louis today. And not a lot of changes like there was a season ago when it was wholesale changes in St. Louis. The St. Louis Rams are starting to build something. And so they're turning into a team that is starting to become very competitive in the NFC West division. So today we'll talk about what's new in St. Louis. But as always, before you can get to what's new, we got to talk about getting rid of the old stuff in St. Louis to make space for all of the new acquisitions and signees for the St. Louis Rams. So before we can get to the new, it's out with the old in St. Louis.
Hey, what should we do with this old stuff? Get rid of it.
As always, in order to go over all of the things that I do, out with the old, in with the new, any philosophical changes, whatever the case may be, I always need the assistance of not only my big board behind me, but my trusty handy dandy pointer. I've got both. Let's get to the big board and talk about out with the old in St. Louis. And there are no coaching changes. Same offensive coordinator, same defensive coordinator, same head coach. So all of those remain intact. So we'll start with players now. And this first one, bittersweet if you're a St. Louis fan, running back Steven Jackson. And he's been a workhorse for you over the life of his career. He's been in the league about 9 or 10 years, every year eclipsing 1,000 yards. Hasn't always been the healthiest guy, but he's been literally a battering ram for you. He was the St. Louis Rams football team. He exemplified what it meant to be a St. Louis Ram. And so he's going to be sorely missed in St. Louis. If you had it your way, he probably would have finished his career a Ram. However, the Rams felt so deeply in gratitude to this guy who has been a rock for you over the years, yet has never played in a playoff game, has never been part of a winning team, has never been a winner in his career. Rams felt like, hey, you're getting up there in age. We could use some younger blood at the position, and we want to give you the opportunity to go and find a way to win in this league. It probably won't happen, and no one is admitting that it won't happen in St. Louis, but the writing's on the wall. The Rams know they're probably a year or two away from making any power moves in the NFC West, and so they allowed Steven Jackson, who is on borrowed time. You know, once you hit that 30 mark as a running back, you are now on borrowed time. Steven Jackson is on that time right now, and so they allowed him to go. Time is precious for Steven Jackson. He's now in Atlanta. Sad to see him go, but Steven Jackson no longer in St. Louis. You look at another big piece of your offense from a season ago. Danny Amendola, your smallest, very productive wide receiver, oft injured last season, and When he was in the lineup, you were a different football team. You are a team that was dangerous, among the most dangerous in the league, because Danny Amendola was always finding ways to get open and create separation and make plays for this offense. When he was in the lineup, you were a different football team. Going to be very interesting to see how he is replaced. You have a guy that can replace him. We'll talk about him a little bit later. However, Danny Amendola will be a guy that will be missed in St. Louis. That is for certain. He is now in New England. You look at another wide receiver now gone, Brandon Gibson. Here's a guy that I was really starting to take notice of. I was really starting to like Brandon Gibson and the role and niche he was carving out in St. Louis. Soon as I really got attached to him, he's out. But I understand the logic here. You have a lot of receivers who look much like Brandon Gibson. And so the Rams thinking in this whole situation was, hey, we've got a guy that looks just like you, plays a little bit better than you, and is a little bit younger than you. His name is Austin Pettis. We don't need clones on this football team, so one of you has to go. We'll go with the younger, cheaper, and to us, a little bit more explosive option in Austin Pettis. So Brandon Gibson was the odd man out. He is now in Miami. You look at tight end Matthew Mulligan, and here's a guy that he doesn't show up on the stat sheet. It's not going to be in the box score that often, but here's a guy that was very key in running the football. Here's a really solid blocking tight end, and he's now in Green Bay. You're going to have to replace him. We'll talk about a guy that you probably signed to replace him a little bit later. You look at offensive tackle Barry Richardson. Your right tackle started all 16 games, was solid on the right side of the offensive line for you. One move shook this offensive line up and made a guy like Barry Richardson expendable. He's now in Tennessee. We'll talk about that move a little bit later. Center Robert Turner followed his teammate Barry Richardson out the door to Tennessee. He's now in Tennessee. He was a guy that was very solid for you in the middle of your line at the center position. He started all 16 games as well. He's on the way out to Tennessee himself. That's all offensive guys who are out in St. Louis. Now we go to defensive football players who are no longer on your football team. We start with safety Quentin Michael, and I thought that he was going to be back. I said, even if the Rams decide to cut him loose because he was a hefty price tag player, he was a guy that was owed a lot of money to, and you were like, we could probably get you for a lot cheaper. And so you cut him, but I thought they're going to work something out. Quentin Michael will be back. Hasn't happened yet. Maybe it will down the line. Maybe it won't. But either way, Quentin Michael isn't on your roster right now. And I don't know if he's coming back. I really don't. I thought he was at the beginning of free agency. I'm not so sure right now, but he's no longer on your football team. And he was your most productive safety a season ago. You look at your other safety that started for you a season ago, Craig Dahl. And this is a guy that has started a little bit of trouble. He moved out to a division rival in the San Francisco 49ers, a team that you don't care for that much. And he went into San Francisco and started running his trap, started telling them how you guys were able to pinpoint some weaknesses and really strategize against them to get a win and a tie. And some of your players on this roster have taken offense to that. And so going to be interesting to see if this spills a little bit of bad blood between these two teams who already don't care for each other as it is being divisional rivals. So Craig Dahl out in St. Louis. He is now in San Francisco. Look at cornerback Bradley Fletcher. And here's a guy that, if healthy, solid corner. Problem is not healthy enough. And the Rams simply had enough of Bradley Fletcher not being able to be healthy, not being able to be a consistent force out there at the cornerback position because he can't stay on the field at 100%. And so Bradley Fletcher is now off in Philadelphia. You look at linebacker Rocky McIntosh. Just as he was in Washington, he was a guy that was solid, never great, never wowed you, never made any plays. He was just a guy that was on the field. And you can always do better than a guy that's just on the field. He was just a placeholder. He didn't make any plays, and so you're not going to miss Rocky McIntosh at the weak side linebacker position in 2013. And so these are all your players that are out with the old in St. Louis. Now we switch gears and go to in with the new with the St. Louis Rams.
Hey, where'd you get this from? Oh, yeah, that's brand new.
So the Rams really didn't go out and make a slew of moves in free agency. They were very calculated in what they did. They went out and got players that they felt were going to be huge difference makers for their football team. They didn't go out and be a high volume team like the Philadelphia Eagles or the Indianapolis Colts, who went out and got 7, 8, 9, 10 free agents. Rams didn't go that route. They said, hey, we'll get the best of the best. We'll get the guys that we think can impact this team right away in a huge, monumental way, and we'll go about it that way. We won't go the more is better route. We'll go the less is better route. And so they went out and they looked for quality over quantity. And so they went out in free agency, and the first guy you acquired was tight end Jared Cook Jr. from the Tennessee Titans. And I absolutely love Jared Cook Jr. I think that he was not utilized enough in Tennessee. He is truly a difference maker. Want to see him flourish now. It's time for him to take that next step. And I think that in St. Louis with Sam Bradford, he's going to get the opportunity to do so. Looking for big things from Jared Cook, a guy that's going to come in and really take a hold of that tight end position and be that pass-catching threat you're looking for in your offense. You look at another tight end, you got Zach Potter, and you got him from Jacksonville. And I talked about Matthew Mulligan, who has moved on to Green Bay. Zach Potter is going to be his replacement. He's that blocking tight end, the guy that you don't hear about catching a lot of passes, the guy that's not going to show up a lot on most Sundays in the stat sheet, but the guy that's going to be opening up a lot of holes and sealing the edge in a lot of running plays. The guy that you're not going to hear a lot about, but is going to be instrumental in you running the football, that guy is going to be Zach Potter. So now you look at your big fish free agent that you got. You worked on this one for about a good week in free agency. This guy had the longest physical I've ever seen in my life, and it all paid off in the end as you were able to land offensive tackle Jake Long from the Miami Dolphins. Had some injury issues in Miami, kind of took the edge off of the player that he once was. He's looking to get back to that status as one of the better left tackles in the National Football League. He's got a fresh start in St. Louis. The St. Louis Rams think he's the answer to all of their offensive line ills, especially at that left tackle position. Roger Saffold, to me, is not a left tackle quality type of football player in this league. You take Saffold now, you kick him over to the right side, which allows you to get rid of a guy like Barry Richardson, who is now in Tennessee. And I talked about that earlier. So Jake Long maybe won't solve just one position. He'll maybe upgrade another one on your offensive line because he'll come in, be your left tackle if he can stay healthy. And then that allows Roger Saffold, who I think can be more than adequate on the right side, to kick over to the right tackle position. And maybe your offensive line will now be solidified by the addition of Jake Long. You look at safety Matt Giordano. He's coming over from the Raiders. Very solid guy that you don't want to start. But in a pinch, you put him in, and this guy flies all over the football field. He's always around the ball. Won't always make plays. Won't always take the best angles. But whatever he does, he's going to do it aggressively. I love Matt Giordano and the energy he's going to bring to your football team. You look at your draft now. So those are all the players that you acquired in free agency. We'll move on to the draft, as these are also players that are going to be in with the new with the St. Louis Rams. You start with Tavon Austin. You know, I think the world of this guy. I thought he was the best player overall in this draft, the guy that could make the biggest impact on a team in 2013. I look for big things from Tavon Austin. And before I move on, if you are looking for an extensive breakdown of each one of these players and the St. Louis Rams draft, I will redirect you to the 2013 NFL Draft Wrap-Up Series that I have done on this team in the St. Louis Rams. So if you're looking for an extensive breakdown of these players, seek out the 2013 NFL Draft Wrap-Up Series. You look at your second first-round pick, the one you acquired from the Washington Redskins, you get linebacker Alec Ogletree out of Georgia. fabulous pickup. If there's one coach in the league that can get a guy that has a sketchy and troubled past to play really good football for him, it's Jeff Fisher. He's the best in the league at doing so. Him and Marvin Lewis are probably the two best coaches at getting guys to play football and focus on the task at hand and kind of block out all of the off-the-field issues and just play football. And so Alec Ogletree is going to be a very good addition to your football team. I talked about allowing a guy like Rocky McIntosh to walk away. This is the reason why you'll be able to do that. And so you look at a safety now, TJ McDonald, you got him in the 3rd round. You look at wide receiver Stedman Bailey, 3rd round as well. So 2 West Virginia teammates teaming up once again. Bailey and Austin will be on the same team. That should be a lot of fun to watch in St. Louis. You look at Barrett Jones. You look at your cornerback, Brandon McGee, that you got in the 5th round out of Miami. And then you round out your draft with running back Zach Stacy in the 5th round as well. So Rams did some damage in the draft. All of these players, every single one of them will make your roster. I will assure you of that. Barring any catastrophic injuries or just pure disappointment in camp, if these guys show up and do what got them drafted, they will be on your roster come the start of the 2013 NFL season. Now we're going to round up the in with the new with these undrafted free agent players for the St. Louis Rams. Now, this is where the Rams really made a huge impact on their roster. And not saying that these guys are going to make the roster because, as we know, undrafted free agents are long shots to make the roster. So I'm not saying that, but of all the teams in the National Football League, the St. Louis Rams acquired the most undrafted free agent rookies. And so there's 22 of them. So the Rams were busy. And much like I talked about with another team that I've done in this series, in the Philadelphia Eagles, who have a new staff, who have a new regime in there, they have a legitimate shot at making the roster because no one is tied to this new regime except for the draft picks and the free agent acquisitions. Everyone else is fair game, so these guys can step in and win a roster spot. That was the case in St. Louis last season. New regime, first year under Jeff Fisher and his coaching staff. So everything was fair game. And the Rams, they kept 6 undrafted free agents on their roster at the start of the season. And by the end of the season, 8, count them, 8 undrafted free agents were key contributors on your football team. So you just never know in St. Louis with all of these undrafted free agents. Some of these guys will probably crack your roster. But I will say this, being that the Rams are now in year 2 under Jeff Fisher, a lot less undrafted free agents will probably be on the roster just because of the fact that he's more comfortable. He's got more of his guys on the roster, another draft, another year of getting free agents, another year of seeing all of the guys that are on this roster and knowing what they can do for you. Now guys have kind of solidified their spot on the team. There's going to be less vacancies for undrafted free agents now. So we'll go through the list and then we'll move on from there. We start with wide receiver C.J. Atkins out of Angelo State, wide receiver Emory Blake out of Auburn, safety Cody Davis out of Texas Tech, safety Cannon Smith out of Memphis, linebacker Ray Armstrong out of Miami. And I remember when this guy was a stud and was so highly sought after coming out of high school. And then his first couple of years in Miami, you thought this guy could really be something. Then the off-field issues came, and then he just fizzled out. He went from a guy that was probably going to be a high-round draft pick early on in his college career to a guy that went undrafted. He could be a steal for you at the linebacker position. You look at linebacker Darren Bates. And remember, I just talked about Jeff Fisher getting guys to straighten up and fly right and play football. Ray Armstrong could be one of those guys for you. You look at linebacker Phillip Stewart out of Houston. You look at linebacker Jonathan Stewart out of Texas A&M. Kicker Brent Baer out of Louisiana Lafayette. Lineman Braden Brown out of BYU. Offensive lineman Kevin Sala out of Louisiana Tech. Running back Benny Cunningham out of Middle Tennessee State. fullback Eric Stevens out of Cal, defensive tackle Garrett Goebel out of Ohio State, defensive tackle Al Lupiano out of Utah State, long snapper George Huss out of Regina by way of Canada. So that's a guy to keep an eye on coming from a different country in Canada. And we've seen guys make that transition. The Eagles got a defensive lineman from Regina by way of Canada last year in the draft. So they're starting to make their mark now. Tight end Philip Luxenkirchen out of Auburn, defensive end Gerald Rivers out of Mississippi, defensive end Reuben Washington out of Oklahoma, cornerback Robert Steeples out of Memphis, cornerback Drew Thomas out of UTEP, and his teammate, cornerback Darren Woodard out of UTEP as well to round out that group. Woo! That was a mouthful. 22 in all as undrafted free agents on this roster. And I won't be surprised, again, if 3 or 4 of these guys crack your roster. I don't expect 6 like a year ago and 8 overall by season's end. But it wouldn't surprise me one bit if 2 or 3 of these guys, possibly even 4, but I doubt 4. 4 is a lot. 2 or 3 wouldn't surprise me if they crack this roster. But I'm thinking more along the lines of 2 of these guys probably will make your roster when this process is all said and done. But that's a lot of guys, a lot of bodies on your roster coming in to see if they can make this 53-man roster in St. Louis. So that rounds out in with the new. Now let's talk about any philosophical changes in St. Louis.
Hey, you got so many new parts. Anything change around here?
So when talking about philosophical changes for the St. Louis Rams, there really won't be too many changes in St. Louis in 2013. We saw all of the changes in 2012 with the new coaching staff, first year under Jeff Fisher, new offensive coordinator in Brian Schottenheimer, new defensive coordinator in Tim Walton. Everything was different in St. Louis in 2012. Now these guys have gotten a chance to settle in. Everything's more along the lines of business as usual in St. Louis. Guys are a lot more comfortable in their second year, so expect the Rams to take that next step. They had a very impressive 7-8-1 mark last season, the high point of their season, beating the San Francisco 49ers at home on a late overtime field goal by Legatron, your kicker, Greg Zuerlein. And so I look for the St. Louis Rams to really try to improve upon what they did a season ago. You look at your offensive coordinator, Brian Schottenheimer. I think he's finally starting to get all of the pieces that he wants to try to make this offense flourish. I've always wanted to see Sam Bradford be protected first and foremost. I thought that early on in his career, he was a battered quarterback. He was a guy that was always taking shots, always picking himself up after plays. You can't do that as a quarterback. You can't do that as a team in the National Football League. You have to protect your prized commodity. And as we all know, Sam Bradford is being paid a lot of money in St. Louis. He's your guy. He's your quarterback. He's your franchise QB. You have to take care of him. I think getting Jake Long will solidify this offensive line now. You've got Harvey Dahl playing good football for you. You've got guys out there that you feel can make a legitimate difference for your offensive line now. Long on one side, Saffold gets to kick over to the right tackle position. Maybe your offensive line now will be solid enough to take care of Sam Bradford and allow him to scan the football field. He's got more options now than he has ever had in his tenure in St. Louis. So now Sam Bradford needs to take that next step. He's got Austin. He's got Bailey. You've got all the guys from last year, including Givens, Pettis, and that whole group. And so now you're looking for a guy like Brian Quick to step up. You've got a lot of options out there. Now you're getting a nice, solid tight end option in Jared Cook. This offense should be really good. You still got Lance Kendricks out there. This offense should be able to put weapons on the field to take care of Sam Bradford and give him some mismatches, give him some space to throw the football. I look for this offense to take steps in the right direction. Now, your running game, there's a question mark there. We'll see how the running game is able to stay above water, so to speak, because Steven Jackson was a huge part of your rushing attack. I don't know if you have a number one back on your roster. I love what Daryl Richardson did a season ago, but I think he's a change of pace back. I don't think he's a primary ball carrier. I don't like Isaiah Peed as a primary ball carrier either, and so we'll see what the Rams decide to do in that capacity. But offensively, you're going to look a lot similar to what you did last year, but it should be a lot better because of the upgrades you've made to your offensive staff. You look on the defensive side of the football, Tim Walton has got to feel like he is in heaven because of the moves you have made over the last 2 years, especially last season's draft. I think getting a guy like Janoris Jenkins was a steal for you, and he came in and really solidified the cornerback position along with free agent acquisition Cortland Finnegan, who I thought brought that edge. And this defense was edgy last season. They were very aggressive, borderline dirty, and they play with that edge that you need in the National Football League. And so they were very physical, very aggressive. And Tim Walton had these guys getting after the quarterback. You've got one guy on one edge getting after the quarterback in Chris Long, who has turned into a certified double-digit sack getter in this league. Last year, he had 10.5 sacks. You look at his partner in crime across from him, and all of a sudden, he's starting to emerge as a double-digit sack getter himself. His first year having double digits in sack, that being Robert Quinn. Here's a guy that bends at the hip, is very athletic, and he was causing problems getting you 11.5 sacks last season. I might have those numbers flip-flop. Chris Long might have had 11.5, and Quinn might have had 10.5. Either way, these guys both had over 10 sacks. They're both getting after the quarterback. They are dangerous in there. Your first-round selection, Michael Brockers, played really well in the interior. You add Kendall Langford to that mix in your front four, and all of a sudden, you might have one of the better, if not the best, front four in the National Football League, the most dangerous in terms of getting to the quarterback. And so the Rams can get after the quarterback. You've got guys out wide that can cover. You add a guy like your second first-round selection in Alec Ogletree, who can be a difference maker at the linebacker position, and all of a sudden, you add in a guy like T.J. McDonald to the safety position as your third-round selection, and all of a sudden, the St. Louis Rams defense looks like it might be that much better in 2013. So not a lot of philosophical changes per se, but some very subtle changes personnel-wise that could have this team knocking on the door of a postseason appearance in 2013. And that's what's new in St. Louis.
What's new in